The ground trembled beneath Ethan's boots. 70 warriors. He counted them twice, hoping the dust had fooled his eyes. It hadn't. They formed a perfect crescent around his cabin, their painted horses snorting in the copper dawn. Comanche, the most feared riders on the Texas plains. Ethan's knuckles whitened around the Winchester. His throat felt stuffed with sand. Behind him, through the thin cabin walls, he heard her breathing the girl he'd pulled from the creek bed last night. Still alive. Barely. The chief urged his horse forward. Gray braids, a face carved from ancient stone, eyes that had witnessed more death than Ethan could imagine. No words, no demands. Just that terrible silence before violence. The chief raised his hand. 70 arrows rose with it, bowstrings groaning in unison. Ethan didn't breathe. Then the cabin door creaked open behind him. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Let's continue with the story. She shouldn't have been standing. Takara stumbled past Ethan, one hand pressed against the bloodied bandage on her shoulder. Her face was chalk white, her legs unsteady. But she held her chin high as she stepped off the porch and into the dust. The warriors stirred. Whispers rippled through their ranks like wind through prairie grass. They recognized her. The chief's horse reared. He dismounted before it settled, his moccasins hitting the ground without sound. Each stride he took toward his daughter carried the weight of thunder. Takara didn't retreat. She met him in the middle of the yard, small against his towering frame, father and daughter, 10 feet apart, neither bowed. She spoke first. Comanche words that Ethan couldn't understand, but he understood the tremor in her voice, the way her wounded shoulders shook with each syllable. She gestured toward the cabin, toward him, her words growing stronger. The chief's weathered face shifted. His gaze moved from his daughter's bandaged wound to Ethan, still frozen on the porch with his useless rifle. Something flickered in those ancient eyes. Not gratitude. Not yet. But the arrows didn't fly. Then a voice cut through the morning air. Cold, sharp, like a blade dragged across stone. A warrior broke from the formation, younger than the chief, taller. His chest bore scars displayed like medals, and his eyes held nothing, no warmth, no mercy, no humanity. Black Wolf. He spoke to the chief with the confidence of a man who had never been questioned. His words dripped with false concern, each gesture calculated to diminish the trembling girl between them. Ethan watched Takara's reaction, the way her spine went rigid, the way her hand flew to her wounded shoulder not from pain, but from memory, the way her breathing turned shallow and ragged. She wasn't afraid of 70 warriors. She was afraid of one. The chief's jaw tightened. Ethan saw the war behind those eyes, a father's love strangling against something else. Duty, tradition, the weight of leadership. Black Wolf smiled. The expression never reached his eyes. He pointed at the sun, then dragged his finger toward the horizon. His meaning needed no translation. Deadline. Sunset. Obey or die. Takara backed away from Black Wolf's approaching shadow, and for the first time, she stepped behind Ethan, her fingers brushing his sleeve like a drowning child reaching for driftwood. The afternoon before had been ordinary. That was the cruel thing about it. Ethan had spent 3 hours mending the split-rail fence along the western pasture, his hands working from muscle memory while his mind wandered nowhere. The Texas sun beat down on his neck. Sweat soaked through his faded flannel shirt. He didn't notice. He rarely noticed anything anymore. 3 years of not noticing. 3 years of waking up, working, eating alone, sleeping alone, and praying not to wake again. The banker's letter sat on his kitchen table, its words already memorized. 5 days. 5 days to pay what he owed, or lose everything: the land, the cabin, the life he'd built with Sarah. He'd stopped fighting it weeks ago. A man couldn't lose what he'd already surrendered. When Ethan returned to the cabin that evening, he paused at the door as he always did. 2 tin cups sat on the wooden table. He'd set them out that morning. Same as every morning for 3 years. Force of habit. The second cup would go unused. Same as every evening. But he couldn't stop setting it there. Sarah's chair faced his across the table. Empty. The cushion she'd sewn still held the shape of her body, though no one had sat there since the night she died. He ate his beans cold from the can, not tasting them. The coal oil lamp flickered against the wall, where Sarah's photograph hung, a serious woman with kind eyes, her dark hair pinned beneath a bonnet. Beside it, the embroidered handkerchief she'd treasured, its delicate pattern faded but intact. He'd sold her Sunday dress, her jewelry, her books, but he couldn't sell that handkerchief. He'd rather starve. The creek called to him at dusk, as it often did. He walked there without purpose, following the sound of water over stones, letting the rhythm empty his head. That's when he found her. She lay crumpled at the water's edge like a broken bird, her buckskin dress soaked with blood. Young, maybe 19, 20, Comanche. Judging by the beadwork on her moccasins, the turquoise at her throat. An arrow wound punctured her left shoulder, the shaft broken off, but the head still buried deep. Ethan didn't ask who she was, didn't wonder why she was there, didn't calculate the risk of bringing a Comanche girl into his home. He simply lifted her light as a child, burning with fever, and carried her back. The surgery took 2 hours. He boiled water on the cast-iron stove, soaked his knife in carbolic acid, and extracted the arrowhead while she drifted in and out of consciousness. Her blood stained his rope bed, the one Sarah had died in. He tried not to think about that. She woke once during the night, wild-eyed and gasping. Her hand found the knife he'd left on the bedside table. Stupid mistake, and she held it toward him with trembling fingers. Ethan raised both palms, stepped back, waited. Her dark eyes swept the cabin, the clean bandage on her shoulder, the bowl of cornmeal mush warming on the Dutch oven, the fresh water in the basin by her bed. Slowly, her grip on the knife relaxed. She didn't release it, but she lowered it to her lap. That's when Sam did something strange. The old hound had hated strangers since the day he wandered onto Ethan's property 5 years ago, half-starved, skittish, bearing scars that spoke of violence. He growled at everyone, the preacher, the banker, even the widow Patterson who brought pies every Christmas. But Sam padded toward this bleeding Comanche girl, sniffed her hand, and licked her fingers. His tail, which Ethan had never seen wag for anyone but him, swept slowly across the floor. The girl stared at the dog. Recognition flickered in her fever-bright eyes, and something else. Something that looked like grief. Then her gaze lifted to the wall, to Sarah's photograph. She went still, completely, unnaturally still. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She studied Sarah's face with an intensity that made Ethan's skin prickle. Her fingers rose toward the image, then fell. She knew something. About Sarah, about this cabin, about something Ethan couldn't name. But before he could ask, her eyes rolled back and she slipped into unconscious darkness. Ethan sat in the chair across from her, Sarah's chair, and watched her breathe until exhaustion dragged him under. He woke to Sam's growling. The hound stood rigid at the window, hackles raised, teeth bared at the glass. A low, guttural sound rumbled from his chest, not the annoyed growl he gave strangers, but something primal, something afraid. Ethan reached for his rifle, crept to the window, peered through the warped glass into the moonlit yard. A shadow moved between the barn and the fence, too tall for a coyote, too deliberate for a deer. Human. Then it was gone, melted into darkness, like smoke into wind. Someone had followed her here. Someone had watched him carry her inside. Someone had waited through the surgery, through her waking, through the long hours of night. And now they knew exactly where she was. The chief's hand dropped. 70 arrows lowered in unison, bowstrings relaxing like exhaled breaths. The warriors didn't sheathe their weapons, but they no longer aimed at Ethan's chest. Running Bear spoke to his daughter in their native tongue, not the sharp commands of a chief, but something softer. A father's voice buried beneath years of hardened leadership. His weathered hand reached toward her wounded shoulder, hovering without touching. And Ethan saw the old man's fingers tremble. Takara answered. Her words came slowly at first, halting and fragile, but they built momentum as she spoke. She gestured toward Black Wolf, toward her own body, toward the scars hidden beneath her buckskin dress. Tears carved trails through the dust on her cheeks, but her voice never broke. Whatever she said changed the air itself. Several older warriors shifted uncomfortably on their horses. One gray-haired man with eagle feathers in his braids narrowed his eyes at Black Wolf, his expression souring like curdled milk. Running Bear turned to Black Wolf. His question was quiet. Dangerous. Black Wolf laughed. The sound scraped against Ethan's nerves like a dull blade. He answered with elaborate gestures, his tone dripping with condescension, the patient explanation of a reasonable man dealing with a hysterical child. He tapped his temple, shook his head sadly, spread his hands as if to say, "You see what I endure." And some warriors nodded. Others looked away. The chief stood motionless, caught between two truths that couldn't coexist. His daughter's tears, his warrior's denial, his people watching, waiting for judgment. Then a young warrior near the back of the formation shifted his horse sideways just slightly, just enough to separate himself from the others. 16, maybe 17 years old, with Takara's same sharp cheekbones and defiant jaw. Her brother had to be. The boy caught his sister's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I believe you." Running Bear noticed. His gaze lingered on his son for a moment, something unreadable passing across his face. Then he turned to Ethan. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of mountains. Takara translated, her English halting but clear. "My father says, this man," she gestured at Ethan, "claims he saved me. Black Wolf says he stole me, words against words." She paused, listening to her father continue. "There is old way to know truth. The spirits show a man's heart through his courage." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. What kind of test? Takara's eyes met his. In them, he saw fear not of 70 warriors, but of what came next. "If you pass, my father will know your heart is good. Your word's true. He will protect us both. And if I fail..." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ethan looked at the sea of painted faces, the weapons that could end his life in seconds. The girl who had appeared from nowhere and upended his carefully constructed emptiness. He should refuse. Should hand her over and return to his quiet misery. His beans from cans, his empty chair across the table. Instead, he heard himself speak. A man's word is his bond. The old phrase tasted like dust and iron on his tongue. I gave her shelter. I ain't backing down now. Takara stared at him, this stranger who owed her nothing, who had every reason to let her go. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, exactly, but the beginning of it. Thank you. Mr. Cole. Her English surprised him, smooth and deliberate. You saved my life. I not forget. Ethan blinked. You speak English? My mother teach me. She say, one day I need... A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. She was right. Before Ethan could respond, Running Bear raised his hand again. Warriors parted like water around a stone, creating a corridor through their ranks. At the far end, two young men struggled with ropes, fighting to control something massive and furious. A horse emerged from the dust cloud, black as midnight, muscles rippling beneath scarred hide, eyes rolling white with rage. It screamed not a whinny, but a war cry, and reared so violently that one handler flew backward into the dirt. Takara's face went pale. This horse, she whispered, has killed 2 warriors who tried to ride him. You must stay on his back until the sun stands straight above. She looked at the sky, then back at Ethan. You have 2 hours. Mr. Cole, and no saddle. They gave Ethan 10 minutes to prepare. He used 5 of them standing behind the barn with Takara, away from watching eyes. The girl leaned against the weathered wood, her wounded shoulder hunched, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Whatever strength had carried her through the confrontation was fading fast. You need to tell me the truth, Ethan said quietly. All of it, before I get on that horse. Takara's eyes darted toward the warriors visible around the barn's edge. Black Wolf stood among them, arms crossed, watching, always watching. The men who hurt you, Ethan pressed. The ones who shot you, they weren't slave traders, were they? Her silence answered him. Who shot you? Takara. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they glistened with something deeper than pain. Him. The word barely escaped her lips. Black Wolf. Ethan's blood turned cold. Your own people, not my people. Him. Her voice hardened with each syllable. 6 moons ago, my father promised me to Black Wolf. Great honor, they said. Strongest warrior. Many horses, many scalps. She spat into the dust. They did not ask what I wanted. Women do not get asked. The pieces began falling into place, ugly, jagged pieces that cut as they connected. He hurt you. Takara laughed bitterly. It was the saddest sound Ethan had ever heard. First night after promise ceremony, he came to my father's lodge, said he wanted to know his future wife. Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, pressing against invisible wounds. My mother tried to stop him. He broke her arm. My father was hunting 3 days away. No one else would help. Black Wolf is hero. Black Wolf kills many white men. Who believes a woman against a hero? Ethan's hands curled into fists. The Winchester felt useless at his side. The arrow wound. I ran. 3 nights ago. stole a horse, rode until the horse died, then walked. She touched her bandaged shoulder. He followed, found me at the creek near your land, shot me with his own arrow, then waited to see where I would go. Understanding crashed over Ethan like freezing water. The shadow outside his window, the figure watching in the moonlight. He let you reach my cabin. Yes. Takara's jaw tightened. If I died in white man's house, murdered by white man, my father would make war. Black Wolf would lead warriors, become greater hero. Her eyes locked onto his. You were supposed to kill me, Mr. Cole, or let me die. That was his plan. But I didn't. No, you did not. Something flickered across her face, wonder. Perhaps at this stranger who had upended everything. Now he must find another way. A commotion erupted near the cabin. Black Wolf's voice rose above the murmurs, sharp and theatrical. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but he understood the performance, the elaborate gestures, the mocking tone, the way Black Wolf played to his audience like an actor on a stage. Takara went rigid. No, 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 no. What's he saying? He says, her voice cracked. He says I am ruined. Spent the night in white man's bed. No longer pure, no longer worthy of Comanche warrior. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He says he will not marry damaged goods, but the white man must die for taking what belonged to him. Rage ignited in Ethan's chest. He watched Black Wolf gesture toward the cabin, watched the warriors' expressions shift, some nodding in agreement, others looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. He watched Running Bear's face contort with anguish, trapped between his daughter's truth and his warrior's lies. Your father knows what Black Wolf did to you. He suspects, but suspecting is not knowing. And Black Wolf? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Black Wolf brings victory. Victory matters more than one girl's pain. Several warriors began moving toward Ethan, their intentions clear. Then Takara screamed, not a scream of fear, a scream of fury. She tore away from the barn, stumbling into the open space between Ethan and the advancing warriors. Before anyone could stop her, she reached back and ripped her buckskin dress open from collar to waist. She turned her back to the tribe. Ethan's stomach heaved. Scars covered her skin like a grotesque map, some white and old. Others pink and healing, others still scabbed and raw. Whip marks, burn marks. The deliberate work of someone who enjoyed causing pain. Someone who had done this not once, but many times over many months. Your hero did this. Takara's voice rang across the silent yard. Your great warrior, your killer of white men. This is what he does to women when no one watches. 70 warriors stared. Some looked away in shame. Others studied Black Wolf with new, suspicious eyes. The gray-haired warrior with eagle feathers actually spit on the ground near Black Wolf's feet. Running Bear's face had turned the color of ash. He looked at his daughter's ruined back, then at Black Wolf. And something shifted in his expression, the terrible dawning of a father who finally understood how badly he had failed his child. Black Wolf's mask slipped. For one instant, Ethan saw what lurked beneath cold fury. Wounded pride, the cornered animal desperation of a man whose lies were unraveling. Then the mask returned, harder than before. Lies, Black Wolf announced. She cut herself to escape marriage, to shame me. He drew his knife, a long blade that caught the morning sun. If no one wants this broken thing, then she has no purpose among us. He started toward Takara. Running Bear lunged forward, but two younger warriors, Black Wolf's loyal followers, blocked his path. She brings shame on the tribe, Black Wolf declared, still advancing. I will remove the shame. Takara stood frozen. Her torn dress hung from her shoulders. Her scars blazed in the sunlight. She had no weapon, no strength left. No one close enough to help, except Ethan. He didn't think, didn't calculate odds, didn't consider that he was one man against 70, that his rifle was empty, that stepping forward meant certain death. He moved anyway, placing himself between Black Wolf's knife and the trembling girl behind him. Black Wolf stopped 3 feet from Ethan, close enough for his breath to fog the air between them. The knife gleamed like a serpent's fang. Move aside, white man. Ethan didn't move. His legs trembled beneath him, fear, exhaustion, the weight of standing when every fiber screamed to collapse. But he locked his knees and held his ground. Black Wolf tilted his head, studying Ethan the way a wolf studies a wounded rabbit. You have no wife, no children, no future. His English was rough but clear learned. Perhaps from other victims. Why die for Comanche Girl? She is nothing to you. Behind him, Ethan heard Takara's ragged breathing, felt the heat of her fever-soaked body inches from his back, smelled the blood still seeping through her bandages. She was nothing to him. That was true. A stranger who had washed up on his land like driftwood, bringing danger and death in her wake. But Sarah had been everything, and he hadn't saved her. The memory hit him like a physical blow, the one he'd spent 3 years drowning in whiskey and work and silence. He'd been in town buying seed grain. Spring planting season. Sarah had kissed him goodbye at the door, her flour-dusted hands leaving white prints on his shirt. She'd laughed and tried to brush them away. He'd told her to leave them. He liked carrying her touch with him. 6 hours later, he found her on the cabin porch. She'd crawled there. He could see the trail of blood across the yard, the desperate handprints in the dust. She'd almost made it inside, almost reached safety. But her strength had given out 10 feet from the door, and she died alone, staring at the home they'd built together. The doctor called it animal attack. Wolves, most likely. Maybe a mountain lion. He'd pointed to the wounds on her chest, the torn fabric of her calico dress. Nothing you could have done, Mr. Cole. Wild animals. They don't give warning. Ethan had believed him, had buried Sarah behind the cabin, beneath the cottonwood tree where they'd exchanged wedding vows, had spoken words over her grave that felt hollow and insufficient, had walked back inside and set 2 cups on the table, because his hands didn't know how to set only one. 3 years. 3 years of that empty chair. 3 years of waking up and reaching for a body that wasn't there. 3 years of living like a dead man who'd forgotten to stop breathing. And now Black Wolf stood before him, knife raised, demanding he step aside and let another woman die. No. The word rose from somewhere deep, a place Ethan thought had withered and died with Sarah. It wasn't courage. It wasn't heroism. It was simply the last thing he had left, the refusal to watch death claim someone else while he stood by helpless. I couldn't save my wife, he said quietly. Only Takara could hear him. But I will not let you die in front of me. Her hand found his, small fingers, burning with fever. lacing through his calloused grip. She squeezed once, not gratitude, but solidarity, partnership in what came next. Then we die together. Mr. Cole. Black Wolf laughed. So be it. He raised the knife, and Sam attacked. The old hound launched himself from the porch like a gray thunderbolt. 70 pounds of muscle and fury aimed directly at Black Wolf's throat. The warrior stumbled backward, knife slashing wildly, his composure shattered for the first time. Sam didn't bite. He stood between Black Wolf and his targets, hackles raised, lips peeled back from yellowed fangs. A sound emerged from his chest, not a growl, but a roar, ancient and savage. Black Wolf's face went white. He recognized the dog. Ethan saw it in the way the warrior's eyes widened, the way his knife hand trembled, the way he retreated step by step from an animal a quarter his size. Takara gasped. That dog, he belonged to the family of Sings with Wind. Ethan didn't understand, but he saw Black Wolf's reaction, the guilt that flickered beneath the mask of cruelty. 5 winters ago, Takara whispered. A Comanche family was murdered during a raid. The elders said white soldiers did it. But there were no soldiers in that territory. Her voice hardened. Only Black Wolf's hunting party. Sam's growl deepened. Drool pooled beneath his muzzle. His eyes never left the warrior who had slaughtered his first family. He knows. Takara breathed. He has always known. The other warriors watched this strange standoff, their hero, frozen before a single hound. Doubt spread through their ranks like cracks in ice. The gray-haired elder with eagle feathers leaned toward Running Bear, whispering urgently. Running Bear's eyes were closed. His lips moved in what might have been prayer or apology. Then the chief's eyes snapped open. He shouted a single command. 3 warriors seized Black Wolf's arms before he could react, forcing the knife from his grip. The hero of 100 raids, held like a common criminal. Running Bear strode forward. He looked at Ethan for a long moment, looked through him, it seemed, into some deeper place. Then his gaze shifted past Ethan's shoulder, past Takara, toward the open cabin door, toward the wall where Sarah's photograph hung beside the embroidered handkerchief. The chief's weathered face transformed. Shock, recognition, something that looked almost like grief. Where did you get that cloth? His English was accented but clear. He pointed at the handkerchief with a trembling finger. The woman who made it, where is she? Running Bear walked toward the cabin like a man approaching sacred ground. The warriors parted for him. Even Black Wolf, still restrained by his captors, fell silent. Something in the chief's bearing commanded absolute stillness, the gravity of a man confronting a ghost from his past. Ethan followed, his legs moving of their own accord. Takara limped beside him, one hand pressed against her wound, the other gripping his arm for support. Behind them, 70 warriors waited in the dust, their certainties crumbling with each passing moment. The chief stopped at the threshold. His hand rested on the door frame, fingers tracing the grain of the wood as if reading a story written there long ago. Then he stepped inside. The cabin felt smaller with Running Bear in it. The walls seemed to lean inward, holding their breath. Morning light slanted through the single window, illuminating dust motes that swirled like memories disturbed from long sleep. Running Bear stood before Sarah's photograph. His weathered face softened into something Ethan had never expected to see on a Comanche war chief: tenderness. Then his gaze shifted to the handkerchief. He reached for it slowly, reverently, as if touching a holy relic. His calloused fingers brushed the faded embroidery, delicate flowers stitched in blue and gold thread. The patient work of loving hands. A sound escaped his throat, not quite a word, not quite a sob. Something between prayer and grief. 15 winters. His voice emerged rough and broken. 15 winters I have carried her kindness. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. What are you talking about? Running Bear turned. In the dim light, his eyes glistened with unshed tears, the first sign of vulnerability Ethan had witnessed in this granite-faced warrior. I was young then, foolish, proud. The chief's English came haltingly, each word weighted with memory. Led a raid against white soldiers, killed many, but they wounded me here. He pressed his hand against his abdomen. My warriors thought me dead, left me in the grass to feed the crows. He moved to Sarah's photograph, studying her face with infinite tenderness. 3 days I crawled, no water, no hope. Came to a small house, this house, but knew her then. I waited to die in the shade of the porch. His finger traced Sarah's image without touching the glass. She found me. Young woman. Alone. Should have screamed. Should have run for men with guns instead. His voice broke. He gathered himself with visible effort. Instead, she dragged me inside. Cleaned my wound, fed me broth when I was too weak to lift my head. For 11 days, she hid me. When white men came searching, she told them nothing. When I could walk again, she gave me food for the journey and said. He paused, closing his eyes. Don't hate all of us. Some of us are trying to be good. Ethan couldn't breathe. Sarah, his quiet, gentle Sarah, who baked bread for neighbors and sang hymns while she worked, had hidden a Comanche warrior. Had saved the life of a man her own people wanted dead. And she had never told him. I gave her the only valuable thing I possessed. Running Bear touched the handkerchief again. My mother made this for my wedding day. It was all I had of her. Your wife. She tried to refuse. Said she needed no payment for kindness. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. She was stubborn, but I was more stubborn. Ethan looked at the handkerchief, really looked at it for the first time. The pattern he'd assumed was flowers actually depicted something else. Horses running across a prairie, the sun rising over mountains. Comanche symbols, woven with love by a mother for her son. Sarah had kept it all these years, displayed it proudly on her wall. And when Ethan asked where it came from, she'd only smiled and said, "A gift from a friend." Running Bear turned to face him fully. Chief to widower, father to husband. 2 men bound by a woman neither had fully known. The circle closes. His voice carried the weight of prophecy. Your wife saved my life. Now you save my daughter. The spirits do not forget kindness. From outside, Little Hawk's voice rose above the murmurs of waiting warriors. Takara translated softly. He tells the others what has happened. The law of blood debt. My father is bound to protect you now as your wife protected him. Movement stirred among the tribe. The gray-haired elder with eagle feathers stepped forward. Nodding gravely, 5 younger warriors' boys barely past their first hunt shifted to stand beside Little Hawk. The tribe was fracturing along invisible lines, those who honored the old laws against those loyal to Black Wolf. Takara gripped Ethan's arm tighter. there is more. My mother. She spoke of a white woman with hair like dark water, a woman who came to the peaceful trading post when I was small. She gave my mother seeds, flower seeds, and said the prairie needed more color. Her eyes found Sarah's photograph. My mother called her woman whose heart is the sun. She kept those seeds until she died, made me promise to plant them somewhere beautiful. Ethan's vision blurred all those years. Sarah had been planting kindness like seeds, never knowing which would bloom, never asking for harvest. She had saved a chief, befriended a Comanche mother, touched lives across the divide that was supposed to make them enemies. And she had done it all in secret, asking nothing, expecting nothing. I never knew, Ethan whispered. She never told me any of this. Running Bear placed a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder. Good hearts do not announce their goodness. They simply shine, and others find warmth. A shout erupted from outside. Black Wolf's voice, but different now. Mocking, triumphant, as if he'd found an ace hidden up his sleeve. Running Bear's expression hardened. He strode to the door, Ethan and Takara close behind. Black Wolf stood in the yard, still held by warriors, but laughing. The sound scraped against the morning like broken glass. His eyes locked onto Ethan with savage delight. You speak of this white woman like she was a saint. He spat the words like venom. You want to know what happened to your precious wife? White man, you want to know why she really died? Ethan's blood turned to ice. I killed her. Black Wolf's smile widened into something monstrous. 3 summers ago, right there on that porch. She tried to hide another Comanche family trader's running from justice. I put an arrow through her heart and watched her crawl toward the door. His laugh echoed across the silent yard. Wild animals. That's what the white doctor said. Yes, you're welcome for that lie. I've kept your secret for 3 years. The world stopped. Ethan heard nothing. Not the warrior's gasps, not Takara's cry, not the wind that had been whispering across the prairie all morning. Everything collapsed into a single point of white-hot focus, Black Wolf's grinning face, and the words still hanging in the air like poison. I killed her. 3 years. 3 years of believing the doctor's comfortable lie. 3 years of imagining wolves, mountain lions, the random cruelty of nature. 3 years of thinking Sarah had died alone because he'd been too far away to protect her, when the truth was she'd died a hero, saving strangers, murdered by the man standing 20 feet away. Ethan's hand found the Winchester that a warrior had returned to him minutes ago. His fingers wrapped around the stock with the familiarity of 1,000 hunts, 1,000 nights standing guard, 1,000 moments when this weapon was the only thing between survival and oblivion. He raised the rifle. Black Wolf didn't flinch. If anything, his smile widened. Yes, kill me. Show them what white men really are. Animals, savages. He spread his arms wide, inviting the bullet. Your woman died protecting Comanche traders. Kill me, and my brothers will slaughter you. Then they will burn every white settlement within 3 days' ride. Your wife's kindness will birth a war that kills thousands. The warriors holding Black Wolf exchanged uncertain glances. Some nodded at his words, the old hatred still burning. The desire for vengeance against generations of broken treaties and stolen land. Others looked to Running Bear, waiting for guidance that didn't come. Ethan's finger found the trigger. 1 shot, 1 squeeze. Justice for Sarah. delivered hot and immediate. Black Wolf would die knowing he'd lost, knowing his victim's husband had claimed the final victory. But then what Ethan saw it unfold in his mind, the chaos after the gunshot. Warriors choosing sides, blood soaking the dust of his yard. Takara caught in the crossfire. Little Hawk cut down defending his sister. Running Bear forced to watch his children die because one white man couldn't contain his rage. Sarah's voice whispered through his memory. Don't become what they expect, Ethan. Don't let them make you into a monster. She'd said that years ago, after a neighbor's barn was burned by raiders. Ethan had wanted to join the posse, hunting them down, wanted blood for blood. Pain for pain. Sarah had held his hands in hers and looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes. Hate is a seed too. Plant it, and it grows. But it doesn't grow flowers. He'd stayed home that night. The posse had caught the raiders and hanged them from a cottonwood tree. The neighbor got his vengeance. But 3 of the posse died in the chase, and their widows wept at funerals for months afterward. Ethan's arms trembled. The rifle weighed 1,000 pounds. Black Wolf saw the hesitation. His smile faltered, replaced by confusion. Shoot me, coward! Avenge your woman! Or are you too weak? My wife died protecting innocent people. Ethan's voice came out steady, steadier than he felt. She died because she believed kindness mattered more than fear. She died because she saw people as people, not enemies. He lowered the rifle. The movement sent a ripple through the assembled warriors. Black Wolf's confusion deepened into something like panic. This wasn't the script he'd written. White men were supposed to be predictable, violent, easy to manipulate into starting wars. If I kill you, Ethan continued, she died for nothing. You win. Everything she believed in, and everything she built with her secret kindness burns down with your body. He handed the rifle to Takara. The girl stared at him with wide, uncomprehending eyes. I won't let you make me into a murderer. Ethan turned his back on Black Wolf for the most dangerous thing a man could do to an armed enemy. Complete vulnerability, absolute trust in something beyond himself. I won't let you win. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Black Wolf screamed. Ethan heard the whistle of displaced air, the scramble of moccasins in dust, the rasp of a blade being drawn. He didn't turn around, didn't run, just stood there, waiting for the knife to find his spine. The blow never came. Running Bear moved faster than any man his age should move, a blur of gray braids and weathered muscle that intercepted Black Wolf mid-lunge. The 2 men crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, the knife spinning away into the dust. When they separated, Running Bear had Black Wolf pinned beneath his knee. The chief's hand pressed against the younger warrior's throat. Not squeezing, just holding. A reminder of who still commanded here. You killed the woman who saved my life. Running Bear's voice carried across the silent yard, quiet, but every warrior heard. You tortured my daughter. You murdered a Comanche family and blamed white soldiers. You have brought shame upon our people. Black Wolf thrashed beneath him. I brought victories, I brought scalps, I made us strong. You made us feared. That is not the same as strong. Running Bear stood, releasing his grip. The council will decide your fate, but I know what I recommend. The gray-haired elder with eagle feathers stepped forward. His voice rang out in Comanche, a formal pronouncement that needed no translation. The cadence told its own story: accusation, judgment, condemnation. Takara translated softly for Ethan. Banishment. He will be cast out, no tribe, no name, no identity. He will wander until he dies, and no Comanche will speak to him, help him, or acknowledge his existence. Among our people, this is worse than death. Death brings honor. This brings nothing. Black Wolf's face contorted with rage, then fear, then something that might have been despair. You can't. I am a hero. I killed dozens of white. You killed women. The elder interrupted in accented English. You tortured children. You murdered your own people. He spat at Black Wolf's feet. You are no warrior. You are a rabid dog, and we cast you out before you bite again. Warriors dragged Black Wolf toward the edge of the property. His screams faded into incoherent rage, then pleading, then silence as the distance swallowed him. Ethan watched until the struggling figure disappeared over the ridge, watched the monster who had murdered Sarah vanish into the emptiness he deserved. It wasn't justice. Not really. Sarah was still dead. The family she tried to protect was still dead. 3 years of grief couldn't be erased by one man's exile. But it was something. A beginning. Little Hawk approached hesitantly. The boy's face was solemn, his eyes older than his years. He held something in his palm, a small circle of gold that caught the sunlight. Sarah's wedding ring. He kept it, Little Hawk said quietly. Wore it on a cord around his neck. A trophy. He placed the ring in Ethan's palm and closed his fingers around it. It should go home now. Ethan stared at the ring. He'd searched everywhere for it after Sarah's death torn the cabin apart. Walked every inch of the property, convinced it had been lost in whatever attack had killed her. Convinced that losing the ring meant losing the last tangible piece of their marriage. Now it sat in his hand, warm from another man's body heat, finally returned. The tears came without warning. 3 years of suppressed grief, 3 years of stoic survival, 3 years of refusing to feel anything because feeling meant drowning. All of it broke loose at once. Ethan's shoulders shook. His vision blurred. He wept for Sarah, for the secrets she'd kept, for the kindness she'd sown that he was only now beginning to harvest. Takara's hand found his arm. She said nothing, just stood beside him while he cried, her presence a steady anchor in the storm. Running Bear approached when the tears finally slowed. The chief's face held no judgment, only understanding. Your wife planted seeds she never saw bloom, he said. Today, you water them with mercy instead of blood. He clasped Ethan's shoulder, warrior to warrior, father to widower, debtor to creditor, in a currency that transcended gold or goods. She would be proud. Ethan looked at the ring in his palm, then at Takara, then at the cabin where Sarah had hidden a wounded chief and changed the course of 2 lives without ever knowing. What happens now? He asked. Running Bear smiled, the first genuine smile Ethan had seen from him. Now we honor the old laws. You saved my daughter. I owe you a life debt. He gestured to the warriors still assembled in the yard. We do not forget our debts. The warriors departed like a receding tide. One by one, they mounted their painted horses and turned toward the horizon. Some nodded at Ethan as they passed the small acknowledgments that carried weight beyond words. Others simply rode in silence, processing the morning's revelations. The gray-haired elder with eagle feathers paused longest, his ancient eyes studying Ethan with something approaching respect before he clicked his tongue and guided his horse away. Within an hour, The yard stood empty except for trampled dust and hoofprints. But Running Bear remained. The chief stood before Ethan with the formality of a man conducting sacred business. Little Hawk flanked him on one side. Takara on the other, a family reunited, if only temporarily. The old laws demand balance. Running Bear said, "You saved my daughter. You showed mercy to your wife's killer. You have earned more than words can repay." He gestured, and Little Hawk stepped forward bearing 3 items. The first was a knife, not a weapon of war, but something older and finer. The handle was wrapped in worn leather, the blade etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon light. "My grandfather's blade," Running Bear explained. "Carried in peace, never raised in anger. May it remind you that strength and gentleness can share the same hand." The second was a buffalo robe, thick and heavy, its hide painted with scenes of horses running beneath an endless sky. For the house of woman whose heart is the sun, so her spirit knows she is honored by those she helped. The third was a leather pouch that clinked when Little Hawk placed it in Ethan's palm. Gold dust, enough weight that Ethan didn't need to count it. He knew instinctively it would more than cover his debt to the bank. 15 years ago, your wife gave me my life," Running Bear said. "This is poor payment for such a gift, but it is what I have." Ethan tried to refuse. The words formed on his tongue protestations about charity, about earning his own way, about not needing help from anyone. But the words died before they escaped. Sarah would have accepted. Sarah would have understood that refusing a gift sometimes wounded the giver more than poverty wounded the receiver. "Thank you," Ethan said simply. Running Bear clasped his forearm in the warrior's grip. "We will return before the first snow to check on my daughter." His eyes flickered to Takara, then back to Ethan. "She has asked to stay. To heal. I have agreed if you permit it." Ethan looked at Takara. She stood with her wounded shoulder hunched, her torn dress hastily repaired with strips of cloth, her face bearing the exhaustion of someone who had run for 3 days and fought for her life at the end of it. But beneath the weariness, something else flickered. Hope, perhaps, or simply the relief of someone who had finally found safe harbor. "She can stay as long as she needs," Ethan heard himself say. Running Bear nodded once, a gesture that sealed agreements more binding than any written contract. He embraced his daughter, whispered something in her ear that made her eyes glisten, then mounted his horse. Little Hawk lingered a moment longer. The boy pressed something into Takara's hand, a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. Brother and sister exchanged words too quiet for Ethan to hear. And then Little Hawk was gone too, riding hard to catch up with his father. The dust settled. The hoofbeats faded. Silence reclaimed the prairie. Ethan and Takara stood alone in the yard, 2 strangers bound by violence and mercy and the long shadow of a woman neither had fully known. "What did your brother give you?" Ethan asked. Takara unwrapped the leather bundle. Inside lay a handful of dried seeds, small and dark, unremarkable to the eye. "My mother's seeds," she whispered. "The ones your wife gave her years ago. Little Hawk kept them after our mother passed," he thought. Her voice caught. "He thought I should plant them here, where they began." Ethan's chest tightened. Another thread in the tapestry Sarah had woven without his knowledge. Another connection spanning years and cultures and the vast distance between peoples who were supposed to be enemies. "There's good soil behind the cabin," he said, "near the cottonwood tree. That's where Sarah is buried." Oh, Takara looked up at him with something like wonder. "You would let me plant them there? I think Sarah would want that. Flowers on her grave, grown from seeds she gave away years ago." He tried to smile. It felt rusty. Unfamiliar, a muscle long unused. "She always said the prairie needed more color." They planted the seeds together as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Ethan dug the holes with his worn spade, while Takara placed each seed with careful reverence, whispering words in Comanche that he didn't understand, but somehow felt. When they finished, they stood side by side looking at the small patch of disturbed earth beside the simple wooden cross that marked Sarah's resting place. "They will bloom in spring," Takara said. "Red and gold, my mother told me. Like sunrise." Spring. The word felt foreign in Ethan's mind. For 3 years, he had stopped thinking in terms of future seasons. Each day had been its own isolated struggle, disconnected from what came before or after. The idea of looking forward, of anticipating something months away, felt almost transgressive. But standing here, beside this girl he'd pulled from a creek bed less than a day ago, Ethan realized he wanted to see those flowers bloom, wanted to witness the sunrise colors spreading across Sarah's grave. Proof that kindness planted years ago could still bear fruit. Inside the cabin, Ethan set the table for dinner. His hands moved automatically to place 2 cups, 2 plates, 2 sets of utensils, the same ritual he'd performed every day for 3 years. But tonight, for the first time since Sarah's death, the second setting wouldn't go unused. Takara entered hesitantly, still unused to the space. Her gaze found Sarah's photograph on the wall, and she paused. "May I light a candle for her? It is our custom to honor those who have walked into the spirit world." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. He watched as Takara lit a tallow candle and placed it beneath Sarah's photograph. She spoke softly in Comanche, a prayer or a blessing, or simply words of gratitude, and the flame danced in the still air as if responding to her voice. When she finished, she turned to Ethan. "She saved my father. You saved me. The circle is complete." "Is it?" Ethan asked. The question surprised him. He hadn't meant to speak it aloud. Takara considered. "Perhaps circles are never truly complete. Perhaps they just expand, touch other circles, create patterns we cannot see until we stand far away." They ate in silence beans and cornbread, simple fare that tasted better shared than it ever had alone. Sam lay beneath the table, his head resting on Ethan's boot, his tail occasionally thumping against Takara's ankle. The coal oil lamp cast warm shadows across the walls, softening the cabin's harsh edges. "Mr. Cole," Takara said as they cleared the dishes. "Why did you not kill Black Wolf? You had the right, the weapon. No one would have blamed you." Ethan dried his hands on a cloth, taking his time before answering. "Because Sarah didn't raise her hands against the people who would have killed her patient. Because she hid your father when revealing him would have been safer. Because she spent her whole life proving that kindness matters more than fear." He hung the cloth on its hook. "If I'd pulled that trigger, I'd have proven her wrong. And she was never wrong about the important things." Takara absorbed this in silence. Then, softly, "She was a remarkable woman. Yes, she was later, as darkness settled over the prairie and stars emerged like scattered diamonds. Ethan sat on the porch with his cold coffee and watched the horizon. Takara had retired to Sarah's old room, had hesitated at the threshold, until Ethan assured her Sarah would have wanted the bed used, not preserved like a shrine. The cabin felt different tonight, not emptier, though one person had become two. Not fuller, exactly, just different. Alive in a way it hadn't been for years. The silence was no longer oppressive, but companionable, shared between a man and a girl and an old dog who had somehow, against all odds, found each other. Ethan looked at Sarah's wedding ring, now hanging on a leather cord around his neck. He'd worn his own ring continuously since the wedding, had never taken it off. Not even when his fingers swelled from summer heat or cracked from winter cold. Now Sarah's ring rested against his chest, close to his heart, where it belonged. "I understand now," he said quietly, speaking to the stars or to Sarah or to no one at all. "Why you never told me. You weren't keeping secrets. You were just living your faith, helping people because it was right. Not because you wanted credit." The stars offered no response, but somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, and another answered, and the prairie hummed with the ancient music of creatures going about their lives, indifferent to the small dramas of humans. Ethan smiled. It felt less rusty this time. Tomorrow, there would be work to do. The fence still needed mending. The bank would need to be paid. Takara's wound would need fresh bandages. Life would continue its relentless forward motion, dragging him along whether he resisted or not. But for the first time in 3 years, Ethan didn't resent the dragging. For the first time since he'd buried Sarah beneath the cottonwood tree, he looked forward to tomorrow, inside the cabin. Takara coughed softly in her sleep. Sam's ears perked, then relaxed when the sound subsided. The coal oil lamp flickered through the window, casting a warm rectangle of light onto the dark porch. Home, Ethan thought. Such a small word for such a complicated idea. But maybe it wasn't complicated at all. Maybe home was simply the place where someone waited when you returned. The place where an extra cup on the table meant hope instead of grief. The place where seeds planted in sorrow could bloom into unexpected joy. Ethan finished his coffee and went inside, closing the door gently against the night. Sarah never knew the seeds she planted would one day save her husband's life. She never saw the flowers bloom on her own grave, grown from gifts she gave to strangers years before her death. She never learned that the wounded warrior she hid in secret would become the father of the girl who would bring light back into Ethan's empty cabin. That is the nature of kindness. We plant it without knowing where it will grow. We offer it without expecting harvest. And sometimes, years or even decades later, it returns to us in ways we never could have imagined. Ethan spent 3 years believing he had nothing left to live for. He was wrong. He just could not see the seeds already growing in the dark soil around him. If you have ever helped a stranger without expecting anything in return, this story is for you. If you have ever received unexpected kindness during your darkest hour, this story is for you. If you have ever lost someone you loved and wondered whether joy would ever find you again, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments, what seed of kindness has someone planted in your life? Or what kindness have you given that you never saw bloom?